Happy Monday, everyone. My name is Christian Barker. It's the 10th of August, and this is today's installment of Banter with Barker. And today I have the great pleasure of interviewing a gentleman I've known for probably about 15 years now, name of Loh Lik Peng. Peng is a amazing hospitality entrepreneur who is the man behind many of certainly Singapore's finest restaurants, hotels. He's got hotels and restaurants in Singapore, in Sydney, County Clare in Ireland, London, and is there anywhere else I'm forgetting about? All of which are under the umbrella of Peng's organization, which is called Unlisted Collection. And I'm just going to invite Peng to join us right now. Peng seems to have joined us. Fantastic. If you can just hit that request to join button, we will get talking. Nice to see you here as well, Chloe. Always a pleasure. Why is it telling me Peng is unable to join? I don't know, we have some sort of momentary issue here. Bear with us, please. Well, Peng, it should have just come up with a notification saying request to join this chat, and then if you hit that, it will come on. But I'm trying to invite you in, and I'm not having any luck for some reason. Okay, here we go. I think we've got it functioning now. Oh, no, it's saying you declined me, Peng. Hang on, I'm going to try again. No. Oh my goodness, haven't had an issue like this before. It's normally just the Americans that we struggle with. Let me see. No, still no good there. Peng, maybe you just want to jump out and rejoin the conversation. It might work again. Sorry about this, you all. Ah, here we are. Excellent. Hello, Peng. How you doing? We got you. So is this, am I...
How's that?
Yeah, very, very good. Very, very good.
Sorry, I was trying to join my laptop. Maybe it just doesn't work with the laptop. So I just switched quickly because I thought it'd be easier with the setup with my laptop.
Yeah. Well, Instagram makes it very difficult to do things with your laptop for some reason.
Okay, so you'll have to excuse the shaky hands. Let me try and set this up. I thought I'd be clever and use my laptop because that would have been easier. But
yeah.
okay, let me see if this works.
Anyway,
okay.
Look, really grateful to you for joining us on Singapore's National Day holiday. For those of us, those watching from overseas might not be aware that it's the 55th anniversary of Singapore's independence, or was yesterday at least. So I'm fresh out of the swimming pool. I don't know about you. But look, good to be speaking with you. It's been a difficult 6 months, I imagine. 2020,
yes.
Very challenging year for someone in your business. How have you found facing these challenges, and how have you sort of overcome what we've been through the last 6, 7, 8 months?
Yeah, it's a tough one. You know, we are in hotels and restaurants, and I guess apart from airlines, we are probably the worst hit sector. So it's been difficult. It's been also a learning experience, a steep learning curve, you know. And I want to say also that maybe a little bit of a silver lining for me personally in not having to travel as much, in fact, not having to travel at all. So
Sure.
in some ways, it's quite nice to be in Singapore and spend time with the family. So, but from a professional point of view, it's been the most difficult few months in my experience ever, you know. And I've lived through SARS and the Asian financial crisis and the Great Financial Crisis, all of
Mm.
which seem like, you know, minor events compared to this.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask you because you and I met around about pretty similar time to when I first came to Singapore, which was more than 16 years ago now. When you'd kind of
Wow.
some of
That long,
your very
yeah,
first ventures, first
yeah.
hotels and restaurants and things, and we both, you know, navigated the 2008 and GFC and all of that sort of thing. How do you find that the situation that we're facing now compares with what happened in '08?
I think what the difference for me has certainly been is the sort of shocks were really global, you know.
Mm.
And we operate in Singapore, in UK, in Ireland, China, Shanghai,
Yes.
Australia, and virtually every market was hit at the same time, you know. And so the depth of the event, the speed of the event, the sort of global reach of the event was truly shocking, I would say. You know,
Mm.
you had hardly any time to breathe, hardly any time to react. I mean, we noticed first in China, right, when it hit. We have some restaurants there.
Yep.
And I thought, well, okay, it's really, really bad in China, and maybe they'll contain it. Next thing I knew, it was spreading around the world, and all our restaurants and hotels around the world virtually shut down, and went into lockdown in a 2 week period. And then within 2 weeks, Singapore did as well, right, by April. But
Yep.
we saw the effects by Chinese New Year. We knew something bad was going to happen already. You know,
Yeah.
so it's been yeah, quite shocking for me, I would say.
Yeah. Obviously, you know, the Unlisted Collection is your umbrella organization for all of these restaurants and hotels around the world. And as you were saying, and as I was saying in the intro there,
Mm,
you know, you've got a lot of properties here in Singapore, but then also London, Sydney, Shanghai, as you just said. That was the one that
mm.
slipped my memory. So I guess, you know, uniquely placed to be able to comment on how this thing has been handled and how the hospitality industry has been able to, yeah, to face these challenges in quite a number of different territories. So, you know, what have been the main differences between the way that you've had to kind of, yeah, nimbly dance around this great disaster in all of these different countries?
I would say, you know, the policy responses have all been reasonably effective, I would say. If you look at all the places that we're in, whether it's Australia or UK, Ireland, the policy responses have been similar, right? Everyone
Mm.
has acted to protect jobs. Everyone has kind of, Singapore included, tried to hold off as much as possible the effects of a shutdown, which means that, you know, they suspended many contracts. So you can see in the UK, they suspended VAT, right? It's gone
Mm.
from 20% to 5% for hospitality. In Australia, they had the JobKeepers allowance, you know.
Yep.
So every country, we saw a massive, massive, massive intervention from the state in order to protect jobs and in order to mitigate the worst effects, commercial effects of the shutdown.
Mm.
And in a way, those policy responses were necessary because this was an enforced shutdown, right? Nobody could plan for these. All the banks were scrambling to make sure that their customers survived and to make sure that there wasn't a avalanche of business failures. Look, that avalanche may still happen. This
Mm.
is a delay that allows a bit of breathing room for businesses. But we are in no doubt that the pain hasn't really quite started yet. It will get worse in the coming months and the coming years. But at the moment, all the policy responses have been reasonably effective, and I would say they have followed a common thread. Everyone is trying to stave off large unemployment and make sure that people have an income, because everything shut down virtually all at once, right? All economic activity stopped. Travel stopped. People couldn't go to offices. Restaurants couldn't operate. Banks couldn't operate. So, people's incomes disappeared overnight, literally. And I don't really know how long they can continue to put this kind of stimulus into the markets. So it's delaying the worst effects of this shutdown. But I'm in no doubt that things will get much worse in the coming months.
Okay, well that's
it sounds awful and bleak, but
that's sobering, despite the fact that I've just had a glass of white wine. But how has the effect of the expansion in food delivery, or I've been hearing from a lot of friends in hospitality that the charges from the food delivery services are quite steep, so you end up having a lot of your margin bitten into through that. And then there are so many other challenges. It's really difficult to get excellent food to someone's table at home. There are big challenges getting that high standard of food delivered to someone's table in their living room, in their dining room, as opposed to sending it out from a restaurant kitchen onto the table.
Yeah. So there's no doubt that the quality isn't quite the same. We make no we don't apologize for that. It's simply impossible, right? You go to a restaurant, you pay because the food is able to meet a very, very high standard. Frankly, when you do home delivery, it can't ever quite be the same. We make adjustments to the menus and things like that so that it's a little bit better. But the reality is, we all know that if you eat in Odette, Julian's going to produce a better meal for you than if he tried to send you a meal into your home where you have to plate it yourself and possibly heat it up yourself. I think he shouldn't need to apologize for that. That's just the reality of the situation. But it's how we have to adapt. It's the same thing with food delivery platforms. You're right. If you give the margins, if you give the percentage to them that they ask for, you have no margins. You will make a loss with every single meal you send out. There's no question, right? Because most of the type of restaurants we operate, we're not quick service, we're not fast food restaurants. We don't have those type of margins. And the minute you give 25-30% to these delivery platforms, you are actually subsidizing somebody's meal. So the equation doesn't work for our type of restaurants. It might work for the very casual restaurants or the fast food type restaurants. So we've come up with we're working with Odle, which is a different platform, and we do a different delivery where we are executing delivery ourselves rather than go to the platforms like Grab and all that. Those platforms don't work for restaurants like ours, So I think going forward we will have to look at all those, continue to look at all those models, how we can adapt to the changing environment. There's no question that we have to do more, because I think despite the economy kind of opening up, the reality is that with social distancing, you are still at half capacity, right? And you have to stop your drinks at 10:30 and things like that. So there's a great constraints on the things we can do. So we have to continue to look at different innovative ways of having different income streams so that we can survive. But that's, I guess, our job as entrepreneurs. We have to do our best to make sure we see through this period.
It's all about solving problems, isn't it?
It's all about solving problems.
So speaking of the whole social distancing and having to provide more space, now that we in Singapore are lucky enough to be able to sort of conservatively start venturing out now and dining in at restaurants once again, but with tables of no more than 5 people and with a certain distance. I think it's 1 meter.
Yes. 1 meter, and tables of 5 maximum.
Yeah. Do you think it was easier for a lot of your restaurants are places like like Nuri, you know, like Zen, very, you know, Michelin stars, fine dining experiences where, you know, you're not generally, you know, even prior to this situation, people were not crowded in. It wasn't like
Yeah.
dining in a crowded bistro or Vietnamese diner or whatever.
Mm.
Has it been easier because of, you know, already having had, I suppose, a little bit more of a little bit more separation anyway? Has it been easier to adjust to the new normal, as they called it?
I would say for those restaurants, yes, because they were doing tasting menus, things like that, and they
Mm,
had wider seating, right? If you look at Zen, actually our seating is well above 1 meter, so we have no problems with the social distancing part, or the capacity seatings, because generally people don't go to high end restaurants and have groups of 10. So in
yeah.
that sense, yes, they were easier to adjust to. But the fundamental issues about whether people are comfortable going out, you know, and sort of obviously the wider economic impact too, right? When you look at these fine dining restaurants, double-edged sword. Sure, you don't have to worry about the social distancing part of it, but you're talking about restaurants with extremely high average checks.
Yeah.
So you do have to worry about whether or not the economic impact of this COVID thing will mean that your audience is less inclined to spend that kind of money, and
Mm,
quite rightfully, you know, considering whether it's a correct way to spend money in what will be the deepest recession on record. So
sure.
it's
Well,
a difficult balancing act for us. There are all sorts of things we have to contend with. You know, we do try and ensure that we are I guess, market friendly in that sense, whether it's pricing or accessibility and things like that. At the same time, we have to manage expectations about customers, about social distancing. You can't crowd too many people in. You have to have slots where people dine in from, say, 6:30 to 8. Then you have to get
yeah.
them to leave, and the next slot comes in. You know, you got to moderate how much they drink. All sorts of strange things that, you know, perhaps in hospitality we never had to deal with before. So the
Yeah.
game has changed, and we try and adapt, but every day brings new challenges, and we got to enforce new rules almost on a daily basis, right? So at the moment, being adaptable and being agile is the name of the way to go. There's no other way of doing this.
Most certainly, most certainly. What are you seeing from, you know, when you're looking at the weekly receipts in, you know, not to ask you for anything confidential,
Yeah.
but in sort of overall trends, you know, are you seeing that that people are kind of tightening their belts a little bit, and maybe, I don't know, ordering the $150 wine instead of the $200 wine, or you know, perhaps going for the lunch menu, which is a little bit more cost effective maybe than going out for dinners? Or I don't know whether we've been back long enough to even see any trends. But I'm curious what you're picking up on.
So I have to say, so far we are not observing that people are cutting back on spending. Actually, on the contrary, people are spending, and they seem to be spending quite healthily. What we are concerned about is going forward, right? Whether that trend continues. As I said, we are in a bit of I would say, a moment of some kind of interregnum, right, where we are neither between deep recession or shutdown yet, because the government is putting a lot of money into people's pockets still, and that
Mm,
has to end. So we're preparing more for what happens in the future when the real economic pain bites and really job losses start to accelerate. At the moment, to be honest, we're not really seeing people holding back on spending. People really are going out to spend. They are spending quite lustily.
okay.
I would say the habits have changed. You know, obviously lunches are much quieter now. Now
Mm,
CBD restaurants, in fact, a lot of them are not even opening for lunch because the lunch trade doesn't exist.
yeah.
You might get two tables, right, where you actually lose money opening for lunch. So we're concentrating more on dinners. We're trying to make dinners a bit more viable for us, and so we are adjusting seatings and making sure we optimize dinners as much as possible. But we are seeing spending patterns change, right? There's no corporate entertainment, there's no
Mm,
events, there's none of that. So we're concentrating purely on that discretionary, celebratory market, people going out in couples, small groups of friends. That's the only game in town, and it's a social thing. It's not a work thing. So, but interestingly, that segment of the market seems fairly resilient for now.
Yeah,
But
I mean,
I take nothing for granted because, you know, in a deep recession, nobody will be unscathed.
yeah, yeah. Well, this is. No, I'll hop back to that, but you know, I think a lot of people who, you know, obviously not everyone has been economically affected by this situation. There are many people in industries who are entirely unaffected, and they've still been making
Mm.
their income or their revenue, whatever, as previously, and having been stuck at home for 90 days or 120 days, they've saved a lot of money,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah,
they're coming out. Yeah,
yeah.
they're wanting
Yes.
to
We
pop
can't go
those
on our
bottles.
usual summer holidays or skiing holidays, whatever it is, right? So
Precisely.
people yeah, you're right. There is
Yeah.
a bit of that. We feel that there is that element of revenge spending, or you know, that sort of story about people going out and not being able to go to Japan, so they're going to their favorite Japanese restaurants here and dropping a $2,000 bill.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure, there's some of that. Yeah.
Well, there's that, but on the other side, and I think it's something that's you know, if we're talking about in the hospitality F&B sector, that it's an ecosystem, isn't it? And you know,
Yes.
whilst the government might come in and say, okay, we're gonna help out subsidizing the salaries of people who work directly for restaurants or bars or hotels or whatever it may be, you know, what about that small farmer who is supplying, you know, that farm to table
Yeah.
restaurant
Yeah.
with the produce that they need, and suddenly has lost his biggest clients,
Yeah.
you know, and it's not necessarily being considered. So maybe we're not, you know, looking at the whole ecosystem that's
Yeah.
being affected.
Yeah, that's correct. You know, I think if you look at the supply chains that suppliers, as well as the employment that we provide and all that, I think it's easy to overlook the sort of the links in between, right?
Mm.
And whether or not they have adequate protection. I think for now, it seems that our economy government has done well enough in looking after that spread going down. I think so far it seems to be fairly resilient. But
Mm.
as I said, I take nothing for granted. You know, the situation can change very quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk about something a little bit more
Mm,
optimistic.
mm,
You know, I think something that I've always noticed about you is from the very start, you've gone into you know, kind of quirky left of center parts of cities. Like, you know, your first properties here in Singapore were in sort of what
mm.
were initially slightly steamy neighborhoods with perhaps a few dodgy
Ah,
establishments
yes,
around
yes.
there, and have
Denizens
gone
of the
on to,
night. Yeah.
yeah, and have gone on to become, you know, I think, yeah, from gone from red light to green light,
Mm,
where they're very
very
much
much so. Yeah.
good to go. Does a situation like this, are you now, you know, with that old statement, I think it was one of the Rothschilds said, you know, when there's blood on the streets, buy property. You know, is this a time when you are looking for, you know, new opportunities and, yeah, perhaps finding some of those silver linings, some new opportunities that are presenting themselves during this time of great hardship?
Yeah, I think definitely. At the same time, you have to be cautious. And one thing that struck me so far, certainly in the 6 months since this crisis really exploded, is that asset prices haven't really dropped. You know, there are not many distressed assets on the market. And I think perhaps that again is because, for one thing, there's a lot of forbearance on the part of the banks, forced forbearance in some instances, because governments are asking the banks to be much more cautious in looking at their clients' risk profiles and things like that.
Yeah.
And obviously there's a flood of money in the market at the moment, right? You can see that bankrupt companies on stock markets are doing very well because
Mm.
there's a lot of stimulus going to the market. There's this a story of Hertz declaring that it was going into Chapter 11, and the next day its share price shot up 20% or something. So
Yeah.
you're seeing these very contradictory things, and it's the same with asset prices. Hotels that are closed at the moment, that may remain closed for a considerable period of time, malls, all these, which have lost a large chunk of their anchor tenants in America. So a lot of these assets are not coming into the market at prices that you would expect at the moment, and I think that has largely to do with the fact that there's a kind of pricing of assets at the moment. Nobody really knows how these things are going to be flushed out into the system, and so there will be a period of time when you have this dislocation of expectations, right? Whether or not people are prepared to sell these distressed assets at the prices that might be attractive to the bargain hunters, the bottom feeders, and it typically takes 9 months to a year for these things to flush out. I think at the moment we're not really seeing anything down there that's interesting, and that's including places like Singapore or London and things like. If you look at the market now, there aren't really any distressed assets out there. So it's interesting for me. I thought there would be more, and I thought they would come on a bit earlier given the scale of this problem, but it doesn't seem to be playing out that way yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think that the struggles in Hong Kong are going to play in Singapore's favor, and that we'll see perhaps some multinationals shifting to Singapore, and a further influx of I guess well-to-do and senior executive C-suite?
Yeah, you will see some. Certainly, you will see some people are getting nervous and they will move, and some major institutions might decide to move some assets here, headquarters here, and you'll see some headlines for at least a year and a half, right? But what I think typically that's just a knee-jerk thing, and what I think you'll see is that Hong Kong, because of its fundamental strengths, will eventually rebound. And you rebound quite strongly. You saw that in '97, right? A whole bunch of people left for places like Canada and UK, and everyone was all doom and gloom. And then they realized, hang on, the grass isn't that much greener on that side. I have to earn my keep, and it's as difficult there as it was in Hong Kong. And maybe in Hong Kong I have an advantage, because I speak the language culturally. It's more similar. And then people started going back, and I suspect you'll see that a little bit here again. People are all, oh my gosh, China's going to oppress Hong Kong. I'm going to be chucked in jail. If I speak out, I'm going to get thrown in the slammer. And then after a while, they realize, hang on, this law may be draconian, but I'm unlikely to fall on the wrong side of it if I don't do anything too stupid. And then they'll start going back, and then Hong Kong will go back to normal. For a while, I think you'll see some people panicking, but I'm not one of those who thinks that Hong Kong will permanently lose its competitive advantages just because of a change in law like that. Certainly, some parts will leak out, but I think long term Hong Kong has enormous strength, and it's likely to go back
Okay.
to a competitive position.
Yeah. We've only been really talking about restaurants, and obviously you're in hotels as well, which is a different kettle of fish. And at the moment, I'm looking at I'm going to be doing some staycations here in Singapore shortly, because there's clearly no escaping this
Yes, no.
this island for a little while.
Yeah,
so we may as well
yeah.
make the most of it. And look, things could be worse than living in an equatorial tropical paradise. So we do have some nice places to
Yes.
stay here. But by the same token, Singapore is a great deal smaller than, for instance, Australia or the United States, or even the United Kingdom, which has its fair share of green rolling fields and that sort of thing, and the ability for you to get in a car and drive for 3 hours or 6 hours or overnight, whatever it may be, and go somewhere different. I mean, how are you, in the short term, when I gathered that this sort of local travel is going to be the bread and butter or at least the bread and mortar for hotel operators with Town Hall Hotel in London, with the Old Clare in Sydney. Are you looking at is that what you're looking to kind of capitalize upon, on attracting people from interstate or locally staycations, or?
Yeah. It's the only game in town, right?
Okay.
To be
Yeah.
honest with you, it's the only game in town. There's no prospect of international travel coming back this year in any of the major markets.
Mm.
And I would say it perhaps easier to pursue in a country like Australia than
Mm.
it is in somewhere like Singapore. If you look at Singapore's hotel market, it is a very large market and is clearly external oriented. Singapore has 18, 19 million tourists a year,
Mm.
incoming tourists a year. Not counting Malaysians. And I think our gazetted hotel room count is something like 70 something thousand.
Mm.
There's no chance of local tourism making a large enough dent into that stock of hotel room that it will make a meaningful enough difference over the course of a year to their business. But it's better than nothing, right? So people will pursue that. But to be frank, it's going to be a bloodbath for Singapore hotels. The reality is that SHN and all these sort of things that they're doing now is a better bet than staycations. Unless you happen to be a very specific niche in the market in Sentosa on a beachfront, perhaps. Other than that, the vast majority of our hotel room count is going to be is not suitable for staycations, and so therefore they are going to be in a lot of pain this year. In contrast, if you look like a country like Australia, if you look at Sydney, the Eau Claire, actually we are doing reasonably okay now.
Okay.
Apart from the fact that Victoria shut down again, which
Yeah.
causes a lot of problems and a whole wave of cancellations. But the reality is Australia's internal tourism made up about 60% of its
Mm.
hotel pie anyway. So domestic tourism there is strong enough that it can give you a reasonable chance of just about breaking even or making a reasonable case for staying open in any case.
Mm.
And China's the same, right? If you look at China's domestic tourism market, it's large enough that they can feed their hotels, largely feed their hotels. But in Singapore, it's very hard. You can't.
Yeah.
Our hotel stock is oriented to
Travelers, foreigners.
travelers, exactly. And we're seeing that in Ireland. We have a city hotel in Dublin, and
Yep.
that's doing really awful. I think we are doing
Okay.
like 20% occupancy or something. And then we
Yeah.
have a country house hotel, Sheen Falls. A really lovely property in Kerry. It's a relay and chateau property, and we are running at 70 something percent,
Amazing.
80% last month, and this month 70 over plus percent, purely domestic.
Mm.
So certain parts of the market will take this staycation thing quite well from domestic tourism because people still want to travel and still get away. But the city-based type hotels probably have less of that sort of advantage. And certainly in a place like Singapore, it's very hard because we don't have a large enough domestic market. It's 5
Mm.
million people max.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I imagine that scaling down operations of a hotel, the larger you are, it's sort of the opposite to the usual situation where the larger you are, the more economies of scale that you have. It's often said that sort of opening a hotel with 10 rooms, you may as well open up with 100 or 200
Yes.
because you
Yes.
still have to
Yes.
have a concierge. You still have to have
Yeah.
all of these, human and physical resources, whether you've got 10 rooms.
Mm.
Though I'm sure you've done quite well with 10 rooms in the past, Ben, but it strikes me as something that would be a big conundrum of how you do that, how you keep your doors open and still
Yeah.
make it profitable and cost effective if you're only operating 40 or 50 out
Minimal
of a
occupancy.
yeah.
So you have to adopt different strategies. You have to shut down whole wings if you're a large hotel, because
Mm.
the running cost is going to be prohibitive in this market, right? And if you're trying to do maintenance and run air cons in a facility as large as Marina Bay Sands, you're going to bleed every day,
Mm.
So the certain practical things have to be taken. You run down all your stocks. You have to close certain floors. Switch off your aircon, minimize all the other outgoings. There's no other way because hotels are large pieces of real estate, and they just are beastly expensive to run, you know. And the running cost doesn't vary very much whether you're full or empty.
Yeah, 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 exactly, exactly. Let's talk about something unrelated to COVID-19. I feel that sometimes we talk about it too much. It's like COVID-19 and Trump is all I read about in the newspaper, and it just
it sucks up our lives right now.
I want to know about it, but at the same time, so if we could go back to what I was saying earlier, you've often pioneered, I guess, building new neighborhoods around your properties rather than going, okay, this is an A-grade blue chip neighborhood, let's go into it and build a restaurant or build a hotel. You've sort of gone, this place, I see the potential in it, I think, and I don't know whether that is the geography is right, whether that is, I don't know what the factors that come into play. So, what was it that, went through your mind when you were thinking, okay, this amazing building, I can build this hotel, the New Majestic, in it, or this amazing old brewery, I can build, an incredible hotel called the Old Clare, or the town hall, which was, a municipal building again, but was sort of surrounded by, kind of quite gritty neighborhoods.
Very rough. Yes.
Yeah. You wanted to get a taxi out of there the first time I stayed there many years ago. You didn't want to be walking down the street with your.
Well, this was East End of London, Bethnal Green, right? 10 years ago, you can imagine. Yeah, pre-Olympics,
So what were you looking for in each of those instances, or is there a common thread that runs through these things, or advice that you'd give to someone else who's looking to do the same sort of thing in your field?
I think there is a common thread. What I always look for are beautiful buildings, and by that I don't necessarily always mean old buildings. They generally are old buildings, but I would say I look for buildings with a lot of character, something that is unusual about them. Something that's a bit of a unpolished gem, I guess. Often when you find these old buildings, they tend to be in a bit of disrepair, but you can see that somebody, when they first built them, took a lot of care, right, and spent a lot of money. And that's true of places like the Old Clare and Town Hall. There's a certain faded grandeur about them. You look in and you're like, wow, at some point somebody spent a heck of a lot of money building this thing, and it's lost its purpose, right? Victorian age, you had these gigantic town halls populated with hundreds of civil servants. Nowadays, people don't run councils like that. Same with breweries and stuff. They used to build breweries in the center of town, and then this was before real estate prices. I guess in those days, maybe breweries were the equivalent of office buildings. So
you had beer being transported on the back of horses.
Yeah, horses.
Carriages,
that's right.
So you wanted them nearby the pubs.
And I was told that it was safer to drink beer in those days than water, because it meant it was pure. Whereas if you drank the water, you might get typhoid or something, And so beer was commonly drunk, even as an ordinary drink, because you were less likely to get. That's what I was told. I don't know whether it's true, but I was like, okay, that kind of makes sense.
That's still how we operate in Australia. We still prefer a beer with lunch than a lemonade.
So that's always my first thing I look for: a really beautiful building, a bit unloved in a neighborhood that maybe needs a bit of transformation. I don't mind that. I don't mind gritty neighborhoods. I quite like them because they kind of very local. There's something always, whenever I go to city, I try and find something very local there, something that's characteristic of the city. And if you had gone to Chippendale in Sydney in those days, right, before that big transformation, Chippendale is now one of the hottest neighborhoods in Australia, in Sydney. But at the time, it was kind of this odd thing next to the train station. Nobody went there. There was a gigantic disused brewery, that was attracting lots of drug addicts and things like that. But you could just see that. It's like, wow, this is so near town, but why is it been sort of neglected for so many years? So I could kind of get that glimpse, right? And it's the same with Bethnal Green and Town Hall. It was just that part of East London had maybe the last bit to gentrify, but you could see that it was so close to the city. So I always try and make sure the place is accessible and it's got a beautiful building, some kind of special building there. But accessibility is always important. You don't want to have a beautiful building in a part of town that's impossible to get to.
Okay.
So those are, I guess, maybe my two criteria. You know, I want to find really interesting buildings in interesting neighborhoods that are not too far away from getting to exciting parts of a city, I guess.
Okay.
But if you start out with a really posh neighborhood already, chances are you can't afford those buildings. Yeah.
So, no, well, it sounds to me very much like your criteria. It's very much driven by a gut feeling, by feelings rather than. Doesn't sound like there's a lot of Excel spreadsheet involved in those decisions. Though I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah. No. You're right. And if you had, there's a reason for this. If you had done a proper business case for restoring a town hall in Bethnal Green in 2008, 2006, you would never have done those projects. If you had sat down and presented a business case to your banker for doing restoring an old brewery in Chippendale, in those days, nobody would have given you a loan. So, there's always a certain amount of chutzpah, a certain amount of gumption in doing this kind of projects. And you do have to stick your neck out. There's a reason why they're available, right? Because nobody else wants to touch them. And that's also the reason why you can buy them maybe at a price that is a little bit more affordable. And then you take the risk on the development. There's no two ways about it. If you were presented with a lovely real estate opportunity, it'll be priced in. So you got to look for the dogs and believe that you can transform those dogs. Yeah.
You can wash the fleas off.
Yeah, but when you first get them, they are dogs. They're terrible.
Yeah.
Usually there's a huge amount of risk attended to it, and you have to figure out the best way of making it work. Yeah.
Is that why we saw? I think Singapore, in particular, this country has sort of grown just in the 15, 16 years, whatever I've been here. It has literally grown. All of the land mass was a great deal smaller than it is now. But we constantly see, instead of I see beautiful buildings which might only be 60 years old or something. But to me, coming from a new country like Australia, I look at a building, even if it's got, only its mid-century, mid 20th century history, that's still an important part of the history of a young country. And I guess, we're not bad in Australia about preserving those properties, but in Singapore, it's generally, okay, this thing's 30 years old, knock it down, build something twice as tall. And it's ruthless. Does that explain why that these are dogs and that there are so many issues with preserving it and building upon it, that it's too hard? Or is it just, I don't know, or is it more, hello?
Baby. Sorry.
My daughter's sitting right here as well, playing on the iPad, as per usual. I'll let you go.
So,
I'll let you go after this one. You need to get back to the family. But do you think that explains it, Peng? Is that why I think
Singapore's relentless that way. Because we are a small urban, very highly urbanized landmass, right? The minute URA changes the plot ratio on a piece of land, and you immediately find out the value of the land has doubled or tripled, or in some cases gone up 4 or 5 times, then the incentive to redevelop becomes too great. The pressure is too great to resist, right? Because the rewards are enormous and outsized. So Singapore is unique in that way. You tend to find that it's very highly planned, centrally planned, and what your planning uses on a particular plot of land, your plot ratio, your planning parameters can have enormous impact on the values. So sometimes these old buildings that have been around we call them old, but really they're 20, 30-year-old buildings, right? And their design life may be 100 years. But, the minute the URA says, well, now the plot ratio on this particular plot of land has changed, or I've changed it from commercial to residential, or whatever the case may be, then you find that the value quadruples. The developer will definitely tear it down. And so it's a very dispassionate, very sort of cold-hearted business situation, and they will seize that opportunity. That's the way it works in Singapore. It's the way it works in places like Hong Kong, all those kind of places too, right? That's just how it is. And people have no hesitation in doing it. And I guess it's right, because the central authorities want you to do that too, because this is how a city like Singapore develops.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No worries, mate. Look, I could keep talking about this stuff all day with you, but I'm going to let you get back to family pursuits, and I'm going to do the same. My children are always extremely frustrated when I take up the living room to do one of these things, but that's the way it is in Singapore.
She was having a nap she was having a nap when we started our conversation, and she's since woken up and therefore interrupted what I thought would be a quiet space to talk to you.
I'll let you get back to the little one. But look, Peng, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today, and I'm sure everyone thoroughly enjoyed those insights. So thank you also to everyone who's been watching or who's watching back on the recording. But look, I wish you all the very best. I know you've been one of the key figures in some of the initiatives here in Singapore to try to keep the whole industry alive, which I think is admirable as well. You can't look at it like a small pie that everyone needs to chop up, can you? We've got to try to keep expanding that pie.
Expanding the pie, yeah.
Yeah. The pie will come back. Don't worry. We'll get back to the pie. All right, my friend. Great to chat with you. Thanks again for your time. And
no problem.
And thank you everyone for watching today's Banter with Barker with Loh Lik Peng. Thank you.
Take care.
See you later.
Bye.
Have a great day. Cheers, mate.